with no idea what 2020 had in the way of surprises for us. So it'll be interesting to see how this one rolls out. So we're here today for the Kelly and Christy show, and important meeting for us every year. And maybe a little sympathy is due to our accounting staff. I think they find themselves sometimes maybe as being caught in the middle, trying to protect the finances of the organization, at the same time recognizing that we're trying to protect the finances of our citizens. So I think that's probably a situation that electoral area directors find themselves in, is sometimes we feel like we're caught in the middle a little bit, but I think all of us go into this process without purposely trying to be hard-hearted. We're just trying to find the right balance between the organization and our communities. So maybe if we remind ourselves of that, it'll help us get through this. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to our CEO and let Ms. Kinnaman take over.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. So the first motion on the floor, of course, is with respect to the provincial health order, which enables us to hold meetings via Zoom. So I'll just read it aloud for those of you who are joining us by phone. It reads that due to the provincial health order issued on December 4th, that the Fraser Valley Regional District conduct meetings without the members of the public present in the boardroom, and that the Fraser Valley Regional District continue to promote openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability by webcasting and archiving board meetings online, allowing members of the public to write, email, call in, or appear by Zoom with questions, and promoting public participation at meetings through social media channels. So back to you, Mr. Chair, for a mover in a second.
Thank you. So we're looking for a mover.
So moved, Engar.
Adamson. Second, Director Engar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
And next item is approval of the agenda, addenda, and late items.
A motion.
Move.
Director Stobart. Second, Director Dixon. Any discussions? Seeing none, all in favor, contrary, the motion carries.
Next item is 3.1. We have the 2021-2025 financial plan budget presentation. And with that, I will just turn the reins over to Ms. Lonsborough, our CFO.
Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. So good afternoon and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year, Ms. Lounsborough. Nice to hear from you. Big day in the year for you.
Thank you. It certainly is. So thank you for your time today. We have a full agenda this afternoon. The first hour is intended to cover electoral area budget information. As a reminder, we are covering the 5-year plan, but of course, annually we will review. So decisions made today for years beyond 2021 can and will be revisited annually. In terms of process, after today's session, we will make any requested adjustments and we'll come back to the board for the first 3 readings of the FVRD financial plan on January 28th. Prior to that, we will publish information on our website in order to meet the Local Government Act public consultation requirements. Thank you. Okay, so the Electoral Area Services Committee. So during this hour, we will cover the tax requisition summary for electoral areas, and we'll review 8 budgets out of 119 in total that we manage. These make up the electoral area-wide services. In the same format as our budget review meetings in the fall with electoral area directors, the budget owners are here to present their budgets. After all, they are the experts. Electoral area specific summaries have been included in the presentation package for ease of reference and as a resource, but they will not be a focal point of discussion today unless there are specific questions, as we did go through these in detail during our fall budget reviews. But we were happy to answer any further questions. Finally, before we move to the second part of this afternoon at 2 p.m., we have highlighted some budgets that are of a concern for the FVRD budget, and they should be brought forward to the board as a potential risk. Okay, so here is the electoral area tax requisition. The increase is total just shy of $170,000 as compared to 2020. The tax requisition includes $14,566 towards regional taxation, just over $6,000 for sub-regional taxation, and electoral area-wide services at $83,240. And in terms of electoral area services, $62,000. Basically, the taxes that are uniformly applied within each electoral area are those that are summarized here. These amounts do not include specific service areas such as parcel taxes, as they are not uniformly applied to all residents within an area. We will be reviewing all regional, sub-regional, and electoral area-wide service budgets today. And we will not be covering the EA services nor the specific area taxes as we did review those in the fall. So the average impact of the total electoral area tax amounts to $14.57 for the average residential property, or 3.6% overall, based on the average residential assessment of $431,000 across all of the electoral areas. Okay, this slide represents the total electoral area-wide budgets. We are proposing an $83,000 increase compared to 2020 taxation levels. This is the equivalent of 2.3%. The column on the right represents an average residential impact for property owners in any electoral area. This was estimated assuming a $300,000 residential property in 2020 that increased in value by the average based on BC Assessment's preliminary data that we received in November. It shows that the average residential property in electoral areas increased by 5.6%. And you will see the average impact to a residential property owner amounts to $8.24 for these electoral area-wide budgets. So next we'll move right into reviewing each of these budgets. The first, electoral area administration, will be covered by Christy Hodson, Manager of Financial Operations.
Okay, if I could just break in, Ms. Lounsborough, would it be okay if EA directors have questions as we go through, or would you prefer that we wait till the end and have a question and answer period?
By all means, Chair Dickey, we would like questions as we go through. I appreciate that pause there. I think it's more effective to ask questions as we go through, as we have a number of slides and materials to cover today.
Okay,
I have a question.
Good, thank you. Director Adamson.
Yeah, I'd like to know how we come up with the average house price, because I mean, all our areas have different services provided to them. So everybody, but how do we come to the average? You said the average was 450, but how do we get there?
Okay.
It was it's an average that we just looked at all of the assessed values in the residential properties across all electoral areas. It's really for statistical presentation purposes, and region by or electoral area by electoral area. We do have that information available for your reference today. So it was just looking just a simple average of looking at the values across each electoral area and dividing it amongst them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Adamson.
Davidson.
Director Davidson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So through to staff, in summer of 2019, we had an EASC work plan review session. And it just struck me that that was a useful discussion going into subsequent budget discussions later that fiscal year. We haven't had anything sort of equivalent this time around. So my struggle is when I look at this document as a whole is I don't really know with the budgets that are being asked where that will leave the work plan items that were identified over a year and a half ago, and about a year and a half ago, I should say. So I'm just kind of wondering, can we expect similar EASC work plan sessions going forward, or the process seems to have changed from year to year, and I'm just kind of looking for staff comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Davidson. Perhaps Ms. Kinnaman would like to respond.
Sure. I think that for efficiency's sake, through the chair to Director Davidson, the intention here was as we go through each of these budget areas, that each of the managers would identify what the work plan items are associated with those budgets. But we're completely open to having more meetings, but we didn't particularly find that those meetings were necessarily tied with the budget. So this was the intent here, was by creating a slightly more detailed budget process, that would merge those two meetings together.
Thank you, Ms.
Davidson?
Kinnaman. Pardon me?
Another question, Chair? Davidson again?
Sure. Yes.
So what's the process then by which we were made aware of earlier work plan items being completed, challenged, not started, whatever? Because I'm still kind of don't really know when things that we said we would do are actually going to get done, and if this budget will see that they get done. Is kind of the ongoing challenge I have. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Kinnaman.
Sure. Through the chair, I guess I would say that perhaps this would be better dealt with offline. I'm not entirely certain what projects Director Davidson is concerned are getting finished. We have put in place a quarterly report to the board that identifies the status of various projects. We've encouraged board members, if they have questions about initiatives that are underway, to come and ask staff. So if there's a lack of information or a particular project that is of concern, I'm happy to address that one-on-one with the director.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman, and thank you, Director Davidson. We'll move forward. Ms. Lounsborough, did you want to move forward with the agenda?
Yes, thank you, Chair Dickey. We're going to pass it all over to Christy Hodson. We're going to start into each electoral area-wide service budget, starting with budget 102, electoral area administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so hello. So we're going to go through budget 102, which is electoral area administration, which includes general administration for electoral areas. This year, one of the challenges is we're having to use surplus to soften taxation increases for the next couple of years. As you can see, we've got a few years of increases here. We wanted to spread out the increase for multiple years so that we didn't see a big increase in the following year after using the surplus. So we were able to spread out the surplus, and we will be depleting it by 2023. There's not a lot. Oh, sorry. I've been told this is not close enough. Is that better? Okay. So there's not a lot increasing this budget other than inflation and some salary increases here. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hodson. Director?
Dixon.
Director Dixon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Hodson, I guess. So you indicated, or when I'm looking at the next slide, it says something like an increase of 5 point. Why isn't it moving? There we go. Maybe it was the previous one. So what salaries, is this a portion of all the staff salaries as well as the EA funds we receive, or whatever they're called? Like, so I'm just a little curious about that.
So the salaries that go into this budget, there's quite a few, and it's a portion of a lot of different employees' salaries that go into this budget. The increase that you do see is largely due to a reallocation of where people were actually spending their time, including an increase for labor. We haven't gone to bargaining yet, so there's a little bit of an increase there due to the fact that we haven't yet gone through the bargaining process as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hodson. Director Dixon, did you have a further question?
No, it's fine, thanks.
Thank you. So maybe along the lines of what Director Dixon has said. So we're looking at a requisition increase of $80,000 and we're drawing, I believe, 130,000 from our surplus to help fund this function in the coming year. I think maybe Director Dixon is, like myself, not really sure what this budget covers. And I expect that that information isn't readily available. I wonder if in a future meeting, if staff could try and break that down for us and give us a better idea of just where the EA admin money is, what they are funding.
Sure, we'd be happy to follow up after the meeting with a listing of the percentages for each position that goes into this budget. There's quite a few.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. Any comments or questions from directors?
Bales?
Director Bales, go ahead. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. Just wondering how you're anticipating directors' costs. I realize that it's going to be way down this year, but I still haven't got mine put in yet, so I'm hoping to do that in the next few days. But so this probably doesn't reflect this last year's directors' fees. I'm guessing that's for expenses and travel and things like that.
Correct. We didn't decrease the director's fees line. This is a consistent increase from prior years. We didn't adjust it based on any COVID decreases.
Okay, so actually there should be some savings there, I would anticipate.
Yes, I would anticipate there would be savings in the travel line, but not the director's fees line. That is the wages that are paid to directors.
Oh, okay. Expenses would be in other or what?
They would typically be in
Let's
the
see.
travel line.
They'd be in, sorry, what?
They would be in the travel line.
Oh,
The
okay.
line item. Yeah,
yeah.
it includes all the mileage and expenses for directors, and the
Yeah.
director's line item is the salaries paid to directors.
Okay. Yep. Okay. That I would anticipate that should be way down, but anyway. Okay, thanks.
Thank
I got a
you,
question.
Director Bales.
Yeah.
Director Adamson?
And Dixon.
Yeah, are we getting a pay increase?
I will move that to Ms. Hodson.
Included in the bylaw is a increase for CPI over annually.
Thank you. Director Dixon.
She answered my question. It was about why is there an increase for the director's fees? Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So on the expense side of this balance sheet or chart, there's the line item other, which seems to be quite large and seems to be quite variable. I just was curious as to what might be included in the other.
Just bear with us a moment. Christy's looking it up. We have all of those details.
Thank you. Sorry to be getting very technical on you.
Oh,
No,
sorry, my computer went to sleep on me here. So items included in other are items such as postage, telephone, director communications, legal services, consultants and contracting, memberships, building maintenance, grants to other agencies, supplies, EA election appropriation. So there's quite a few things lumped into that other column.
Okay, thank you. Okay, directors, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, perhaps we can move forward.
Okay, thank you, Chair Dickey. We would like to pass this over to our colleague, Mr. Danilous, please, to talk about the building inspection area, electoral area wide service.
Thank you. Please advance the slide. The building permitting and inspection services focuses on getting building permits out to electoral area residents who are building or demolishing structures. A highlight of our 5-year plan is our intention to increase building permit revenues from about 36% of the overall budget to somewhere around 46%. And the effect of that is to alleviate pressure from cost increases on the tax requisition. So we'll be able to do this, we anticipate, over the next 5 years, because we've been expanding our service provision to other jurisdictions like Harrison Hot Springs, for example, Cultus Lake Park. We provide vacation coverage to the District of Hope, and we are increasingly serving First Nations communities like Saylans, for example, and we provide as needed service to a variety of other bands. We would also do this by more frequent fee updates. Our building permitting fees aren't always tracking with cost increases. Labor costs are our primary cost. And so we anticipate more frequent fee updates to keep pace with cost increases. Next slide, please. One of the challenges we face in budgeting for this service is that permit revenues fluctuate a fair bit with the market, and they can be difficult to predict. Now, we have lots of years of data to go by, but the past isn't always a good guide to the future. And our permit revenues will vary significantly depending on the volume of construction in the year and also the type of construction. As a single project like a multifamily residential, a condo development in Harrison Hot Springs, for example, can bring a real boost to our permit revenues. And those are a little bit harder to predict on a year-to-year basis.
Hello, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Adamson.
Do we provide building inspection for Shahamel? I know we provide them fire, but do we do building inspection for them?
No, we don't.
Okay, thanks.
We do as needed service for Yale from time to time, for Sumas. We have for LaCamel, Saylans is our primary. We have our primary relationship is with Saylans.
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. Director Dixon.
Thank you. Sorry, I was busy. This slide that I'm looking at right now on your screen is different than what's in my package, but that's this one is more shocking. My question goes back to the servicing First Nations, Harrison Hot Springs, Cultus Lake Park Board, that one. And I'm sorry if Dennis might have just asked this question. Do they pay service agreements for any of the work or FERD is doing in any of those areas?
Yes, with respect to the First Nations, we bill First Nations on an hour-to-hour basis, and so we track our time that we put into doing building reviews and inspections on First Nations lands, and then we monthly invoice the First Nations. It's a little different in Harrison Hot Springs. We recover costs directly through permit fees there, and also we have, I believe, monies transferred from the taxpayers at Harrison to support the service as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
The same at Cultus Lake?
Cultus Lake Park is within the Area E building inspection service area, and so they pay for inspection, just like all residents of Area H.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. And maybe just to follow up, so Mr. Danilous, we're comfortable that we get full cost recovery when we do provide services to those outside of the electoral areas?
I think we're doing a reasonable job of it. It's something that we want to look at over the next year or so and make sure we're capturing every cost. We certainly are capturing all the obvious costs of our inspector time and mileage, but of course there's more subtle costs behind that, like administrative costs, that we want to make sure we are collecting. I think we're in the ballpark, but I'm not confident at this point that exactly where it needs to be. That's something we'll improve over the next year.
Great, thank you, Mr. Daniluz. Any other comments from directors?
Davidson?
Bales? Oh,
Director Davidson and then Director Bales.
Yeah, so Director Dixon made a comment. I don't have internet connection. So if we're working off of a different slide deck, that's a bit concerning. I don't know if there are any other changes between what I have and what staff is working from right now. And if staff isn't sure or can assure me that there aren't any changes, can somebody please email me what is current, like right now, please?
If I could jump in, when I'm looking in my package on my email, now that I'm doing the math, I would say this screen is right, because my says 2021, the increase was $10,090 from 2020. But if you look at the numbers here, this one I'm looking at right now on the screen looks like the accurate one.
Yeah, through Director Dixon, it's just that if you're looking at something different than if you have something in your email, it's what I have. And if staff is showing something different, I can't see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
May,
okay.
this is Kelly, through the chair, to Directors Dixon and Davidson. We did learn when we were reviewing these slides, just moments before the meeting, we did see a mathematical error on this taxation impact slide. So Director Dixon is correct. The slides that were in the package had a $10,000 increase, but as you'll see, the math is actually a close to $50,000 decrease from 2020 to 2021 taxation. Now, I want to point out, and we will send a copy of that to you, Director Davidson, and I thank you for calling that out. I appreciate that. You should have a copy. We did there were a couple of subtle changes throughout the presentation, but not many at all, but we will send you a package. What I will say is I want to point out, and sorry to interrupt Mr. Daniluz's presentation, but the reason for a $50,000 decrease in taxation is because there is a healthy surplus in this service area budget, and we did that as an attempt to try and reduce taxation. We recognize it's a COVID year, and we really tried to take a good look at the surplus balances that these budgets have, and this budget has a very healthy surplus. We did take a conservative approach because as Ms. Hodson explained when she went over electoral area administration budget, when you use surplus to soften taxation increases, you don't want to do it too aggressively because you could have unintended consequences the following year when you have to get back to where you were. So we did take a conservative approach, and we did apply $50,000 to reduce the tax requisition. 2022 shows a notable increase, and again, we will look at that next year to make sure that we have a good comfort level on where that budget is and whether or not we can apply further surplus funds. And that is the discussion with Mr. Daniluz and our intention to see how we can continue to have that fine balance between keeping the tax requisition financially sustainable, but reasonable for the taxpayer, as Chair Dickey explained in the outset of the meeting. Hopefully that helps clarify, and we'll get on sending you a package, Director Davidson. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Lounsborough. Director Davidson, does that meet your needs?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as soon as I get it, you know, my internet connectivity has degraded substantially over the last few months. So I'm just, you know, pounding my inbox, hoping to see it. But I guess we'll keep going. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Davidson. Director Bales, you had a question?
yeah, actually, I'm hardwired, so my connection is fine. And in fact, I'm online for sure, but I'm stuck on service area 102, so I'm not seeing what Graham has just said. So what I see on what I was sent prior to the meeting was that the decrease would be 11,693. But yeah, I'm sort of, I don't know why I'm in the same boat, but my screen is stuck on 102.
Okay, thank you,
Uh,
Director Bales. We'll struggle our way through this and we'll make sure we get the numbers out to people as soon as we can after the end of the meeting.
Adamson?
Director Adamson.
Yeah, I'm just curious why we giving a big discount and then raising it large the next year. Why wouldn't we just give them a little so that it doesn't seem like 24% increase next year or 22? That is next year, yeah, right? Why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah, thank you, Director Adamson. I think staff tried to explain that this is an evolving budget. No one knows what next year may look like, and it may change in the future. But I'll maybe turn things to Ms. Lounsborough once again and ask her to speak to Director Adamson's question.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair to Director Adamson. You are correct. It is a notable increase in 2022, and we have full intentions on looking at that again in the preparation for the 2022 budget. It is not our intention to have such a notable increase, but we were just trying to be somewhat conservative in the first year on the spreading of the surplus. We wanted to give a notable decrease in 2021. And we can revisit the latter 4 years in the financial plan if you wish before we come back to the board at the end of January, and we're happy to do that.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Lounsborough. Thank you, Director Adamson. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll turn things back to staff and move forward.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Our efforts in the building service primarily respond to applications and inquiries, but we do have some smaller projects on the go for 2021. The first is file scanning. We have building permit application files dating back a number of years in hard copy, and they include several copies of large format plans. They take up a lot of file space and they're difficult to manage over time. We have the last few years have been looking at scanning those files, eliminating the paper copies and retaining only digital copies. Now going forward, we'll scan a number of building files on a year-to-year basis, so we're not accumulating this large volume of paper files and the kind of floor space they take up. But what we'd like to do next year is scan a number of years of old building files. It costs in the order of $70,000 to do this kind of scanning because the files are a mixture of, say, 2 foot by 3 foot construction plans with regular letter-sized sheets of paper and building inspection slips going back to the 1980s or earlier. So that the media in the file, if you will, they vary, and so the costs for scanning are quite high. Now, next year we've included in the budget, I think $70,000 to scan a number of building permit files so we can go paperless. We've got a couple of old vehicles that we're using in the inspection service. I think our oldest dates back at 10 years. It's 10 years old now, and we'd like to replace it. These are pretty high mileage vehicles. We cover a lot of ground in the electoral areas, and we want our staff going up to Boston Bar or Miracle Valley in reliable vehicles. So our intention is to replace a vehicle next year. We also are responding to new provincial legislation that requires building inspectors to be certified. And the province established 3 levels of certification that correspond to the complexity of buildings. And so we've got to make sure our staff that are doing inspections and reviewing plans have the right level of certification. Where we're just about there. The guys have been doing really good with their training and passing their inspections, but we've got a little ways to go in 2021. So we've got some cost profile for training and updating job profiles to correspond to these certification levels. Kelly mentioned that we have healthy surplus in this function, $1.3 million approximately, and that's the result of a strong economy over the last few years, particularly around 2018. And so we've been accumulating a surplus, and you see our efforts this year to bring that surplus down to alleviate tax requisition. We also have a small $11,358 in reserve, and this is a vehicle replacement reserve. A $11,000 clearly isn't enough to buy a vehicle, but this includes this reserve amount that already reflects the reduction in reserve that correspond to our plans to buy a new vehicle. So this is our vehicle reserve going forward. Thank you. Here's the financial summary.
Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Just as a sidebar, Ms. Lounsbury, I realize we only have 25 minutes until the full FERD board budget meeting. Are we on schedule here, or are we going to have to speed things up, or I was just curious?
Thank you, Chair Dickey. We have 4 more budgets to go through and 1 summary slide. So I think we'll have to probably go a little bit faster, but we have, I think we can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
if I may, Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in, if it turns out that we don't end up having enough time, what we can always do is adjourn this meeting and we can reschedule another meeting for another day, perhaps sometime next week.
Good, thank you. Okay, directors, any questions on the building inspection budget?
Director Engar here.
Director Engar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. I just wanted to say that as a neophyte to, I'm not an accountant by any means, I should say, but the most practical thing I could suggest in going forward, and I appreciate what you're doing now, I'm not criticizing at all. The most practical thing for me going forward is to have a sort of walk through when we do things and say, here's the numbers, here's why they're there, here's where our cost savings could be, and this is what we project for the future. So always keeping in mind our point of view as a director is trying to obtain some cost savings for the community. So that's just my 2 cents, and I'd just like you to try and keep that in the back of your minds as you go forward with presentations in the future. You're doing a great job, no criticism, just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Good, thank you very much, Director Engar. Any other questions, comments from directors? Seeing none, we'll turn things back to Ms. Lounsbury.
Okay, thank you, Chair Dickey. We would like to pass this on to the animal control budget for Ms. Douglas to present. Oh, pardon me. We're at the electoral area emergency management budget. I skipped one. So we will definitely have to keep the pace going. So 205, I believe that's Mr. Dick who's going to be speaking to this budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. As mentioned, 205 is the budget for the FERD emergency program. For 2021, we have reallocated funds within the budget to accommodate some new initiatives. Next slide, please. Besides COVID-19, there were many other challenges in 2020, including multiple extended emergency events, which required a number of emergency operations center activations. These activations create extra workload for not only emergency services, but involve nearly all other departments within the FERD offices. As events now seem to increase year to year, it is important to continue to improve our emergency program. Next slide, please. For 2021, we are asking for a 2.39% increase to help maintain and continue to improve the emergency program. Next slide, please. There are a number of initiatives, some carried over from 2020 due to COVID-19. The Fire Smart project, for one, will depend on being successful with our grant application. And there's a further list of some of the projects that we were planning on doing for 2021. Next slide, please. The surplus balance is $140,797. Some of the surplus was due to successful grants in the past number of years, as some of the money within the budget wasn't spent. At this point, nothing is planned to use these funds as we await the possible changes to the FERD emergency program due to the new Emergency Program Act, which is expected in early 2021. It has been delayed due to COVID-19 though. Next slide, please. So here's the financial summary. For 2021, the tax requisition would be $377,930. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there may be changes that affect local government within within the new Emergency Program Act. Shown here, it was expected this spring, but it will be delayed. There's a possibility of financial impacts once the new act is released, and this budget was prepared with that in mind. Next slide, please. That's all for me. Any questions? Thank you.
Good, thank you, Mr. Dick. Director Dixon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Dick. Just I have two. So first one is just one of these slides said something about the free funding for the alertable has ended, and that will be part of our budget. So I have it as an app. Like, is that something we're required to fund, or is that not an app people could just pay for if they wanted it? And I guess I'm kind of curious how much it costs. And I might as well ask the second question at the same time is, again, the new Emergency Program Act that's you're anticipating, is the government, the provincial government, giving any additional funds to local governments for having to implement, I guess, something they create? Or that's my question, if you can understand it.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Mr. Dick.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, the first part of your question, the alertable app, as we investigated it more and researched it, we found it wasn't as expensive as we initially thought, but there is some charges that we do have to cover. And I believe it's somewhere around only the $2,500 mark, but we did find the money within the budget to fund this. And it's not a requirement. However, we did use it extensively during the activations we had this year, and it's the tool that many regional districts are going towards in the future. We're hoping at some point the provincial government will step up and maybe fund some of this and have maybe a universal program for this, but this is where it's at right now. And to your second question, yes, that's part of the challenge with the new act is, as you know, many of the things get downloaded to local governments, and that's part of why it's been delayed. There's been some pushback on some of the items. We are looking at them quite closely, but we just want to be prepared in case some items get downloaded and create more costs for the department, for the local governments. But at this point, I don't know much more. It's still in discussions, and there's still lots of changes that, or I guess we've looked at some things, and I'm looking at doing some more changes to it. So it has been delayed, but we're keeping on top of it. The emergency services expert there has been following this quite closely, and we're staying on top of this. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll turn things back to Ms. Lounsborough.
Okay, thank you, Chair Dickey. We would like to pass the presentation back to Mr. Danilus to speak about the Area 207 bylaw enforcement budget. Thank you.
Thank you. The bylaw enforcement service is focused on obtaining compliance with the regional district's bylaws and enforcement activities when those are needed. One of the risks to the bylaw enforcement budget is that opportunities for cost recovery are relatively limited in the bylaw enforcement world, limited primarily to ticketing. And ticket revenues for us have been really very low, almost insignificant in terms of the overall budget. That's an area that I see a strong need to grow over the next 5 years. A challenge for the service is that we have a relatively high file load, and the issues involved are quite complex. Slide shows a taxation impact for the bylaw enforcement service. You'll note that a tax requisition increase of 2.25% is proposed for 2021, and then similar increases between 2 and 3% in the following 4 years. In terms of projects for bylaw enforcement in 2021, one of the major efforts that we've talked about already in our work planning session is to develop new policy and procedures for bylaw enforcement. We're looking to find ways to improve the effectiveness of the service. You'll see this roll out in starting in the first quarter of this year. We committed to having a series of workshops with EA directors to talk about values around bylaw enforcement challenges and what kinds of policies and procedures we need to be in place to do the job you want us to do here. 2021 will see us implement a modest change to the staff structure. We've traditionally had 2 bylaw officers. Recently, one departed for a career opportunity in another part of the province. And that gave us a chance to look at the workflows, and consider what kind of staff are best suited to doing the work that we do. The change we'll be making is to replace one full-time officer with a part-time clerk and a part-time officer. And that will allow the bylaw officers, it'll free them up from work that a clerk can do, and it'll free the officers up to focus on their compliance and enforcement efforts. We also...
Director Adamson, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Mr. Danowitz, the gravel, we've got the gravel project on. Does the money that we collect in time, what do you call it?
Royalties?
Well, thank you. Yeah. Does that go to this budget?
No, it doesn't. It comes into its own budget, a soil removal service area budget. That's number 604. We'll be talking about that soon.
Okay, thanks.
You, Director Adamson. Director Mr. Danilus, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. The final project I'd like to identify for next year is that we do relatively little right now in terms of proactive compliance or community education around the bylaws that the regional district has adopted. So we see an opportunity to potentially reduce our compliance and enforcement load by putting more time and effort into proactive communication around bylaw compliance. An example is temporary commercial accommodation uses like Airbnbs. People run afoul of our bylaws often, I think without intending to or understanding the bylaws. And so we've got an opportunity to educate people and hopefully reduce non-compliance through proactive, positive communications. We have a surplus in this service of $145,000 and no reserves. Here's the financial summary. You see that the overall tax requisition for the service in 2021 would be $179,700.
Good. So that brings us to the end of 207, I think. Do we have any questions?
Davidson?
Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So through to Mr. Danilus, I do have some outstanding questions to you via email, the answers to which could potentially have a budget impact. And I'm just kind of at a loss as to what to say about these numbers because I'm not really sure what they include and what they don't include. Specifically, zoning enforcement on Stave Lake Quarry. It's been 20 plus years since that's been an issue. And I'm inferring that nothing here is going to change that. And that kind of leads to another question about a comment you made about workshops. I think a gravel workshop is in desperate need, sooner the better. And when can we have one would be my question. Thank you.
That's a terrific suggestion, Director Davidson. We'd be very pleased to participate in a workshop with EA directors. And the gravel service is one that I'd very much welcome guidance from EA directors and the committee and the board on. It's I think we're at an important point in the development of that service where there's lots to talk about in terms of direction for the future. So I'd very much welcome the guidance from EA directors on the gravel files.
And just thank you, Mr. Danilus. And just for clarity, for the benefit of the other directors, there's 2 bylaws going on with Stave Lake Quarry. One is our zoning bylaw 559, which is, I assume, part of this budget, and the other bylaw would be 1181, which is further down in this presentation. But do you have like an idea as to when we could have such a session? Or can we make that a priority to get a date down? Because I am concerned it's going to have a budget impact. We may already be too late.
Perhaps something that we could coordinate through our administrative staff and connect with EA directors and see when schedules might be available to do something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Maybe we had better focus on budgets right now, or we're going to be led astray, and we're close to working our way through this. I do appreciate your comments, Mr. Director Davidson, and that's certainly something we can discuss perhaps at an EASC meeting or in the near future. Turning things back to Mr. Danilus, any questions from directors? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Pardon me? We'll turn things to animal control, 256.
Thank you. This area provides response to aggressive and dangerous dog concerns in electoral areas D, E, G, and H with a primary focus on public safety. This includes 24-hour emergency response to dog-related issues posing an imminent threat to public safety. The demand on this service has continued to increase. Next slide. Next slide. As reflected in the budget, the cost for contracted services has increased. In addition, the contractor has faced recruitment and retention challenges, which have been exacerbated by COVID-19. Next slide, please. The taxation impact to 256 is a result of increased costs in overhead and contracted services. Next slide, please. We've been asked to consider the addition of EAC and EAF to the service area. We will work to consider this while we evaluate service delivery options. We'll be bringing forward this information as well as proposed bylaw amendments as we move forward into 2021. Next slide, please. This surplus balance is designated for legal fees. As this service is focused on aggressive dogs, these files could result in a case before the provincial court. Next slide, please. This is the 5-year financial plan summary. As you can see, the service is funded primarily through tax requisition, unlike the municipal service that has other revenue sources, including dog licensing. Next slide, please. As discussed, we will be reviewing our bylaws and service provision options to ensure we're able to support our strategic priorities. Through this review, we will evaluate additional service area options, and we'll bring this forward to the board as we gain further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Any questions from directors?
Dixon.
Director Dixon.
Just clarification. There's a lack of, so I want to thank the animal control for the work they do, but what I'm hearing from people is that there is a lack of understanding about, quite frankly, the purpose of this aggressive dog bylaw or whatever, because certainly I've had some situations where the dogs have been aggressive, and I don't want to go into details here, but I think there really is a lack of understanding of what, including for me, what FERD is actually able to do, what animal control can and be, and what the public is expecting. And there appears to be quite a disconnect there. And so in the review, I'm hoping that that will be part of it, to say what is working, what maybe could be better. Is there a different direction? What are other people doing? Because I think certainly where there's aggressive dogs, and I know people do want the ability to have some help with them. But again, as I said, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect in what the public are looking for and what.
Thank you, Director Dixon. If an aggressive dog in your community, you have a big problem, and my sympathies. Thank you for your comments. Any other questions from directors?
So Chair Dickey, if I may, just looking at the clock, it's 1:55, and all of you have to sign out of this meeting in order to sign into the Zoom link for the next meeting, which commences at 2 p.m. So obviously we're not going to get through this agenda today. And what I would like to suggest is that we schedule another meeting of this committee for next week, immediately following the regularly scheduled EASC meeting. One member of this committee was not able to join us at the last minute, so this will enable that person to participate in the remainder of the discussion. And since we already had that time booked, hopefully it's available in your schedule. So just seeking support to adjourn at this time.
Good, thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. I would say we're at our deadline, so we're obviously going to have to adjourn. Are any directors anticipating a problem and able to continue the meeting after the next week's EASC? Okay, it sounds like we were good to go then. So thank you. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Move Director Dixon, I'm hoping. Second, Director Stobart. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.